And it's Ken Kraetzer for Sons of the American Legion Radio and RallyPoint.com in White Plains, New York, for the salute to General and President George Washington. And I have a chance to talk with living historian Michael Grillo, who told the audience here about General Washington. Michael, good to see you. How was the event for you today?
Oh, the event was wonderful. The weather's not too bad. Just a little chilly, but it's nice and sunny today.
And Michael, you've done a great job in your career as a living historian describing the heroism and leadership of General Washington. Tell us a little bit about some of the key points that stand out in your research of General Washington.
Well, one of the things this time of year, especially we're celebrating President's Day, most importantly, Washington's birthday, I like to point out that back in the 18th century, certain key figures born in a certain time were actually celebrating their birthdays on a kind of different date. We know February 22nd, 1732, the birthday of General Washington. Well, in reality, when he was born, it was actually February 11, 1731. There was an old calendar being used at the time called the Julian calendar. Now, at that point in history, most of Europe, most of the world started using the Gregorian calendar. Great Britain was one of the last holdout nations. They didn't start till around 1752. So by the time Washington was in his 20s, the date changes. But throughout most of his life, up until he was in his early 60s, he was still celebrating his birthday, February 11th. New York City's first official public celebration of Washington's birthday took place immediately after the British evacuated New York, and that was February 11, 1783. And also there was other incidences. The first time it was celebrated in camp from the military celebrating General Washington's birthday was February 11, 1778. So it was always constantly on the 11th of February.
Well, just so many aspects to what General George Washington, who became our first president, was able to accomplish. When you think back to the Battle of White Plains, that was in October 1776 on these hills overlooking the city and Mamaroneck Avenue, which led to the seafront and on Long Island Sound. What are some of the aspects of General Washington's leadership here in White Plains that stand out?
I can imagine the difficulty that must have been going on at this point. We just were defeated out in Long Island that previous August, chased up the length of Manhattan Island. There was a crushing defeat the day before the Battle of Harlem Heights. In the Battle of Harlem Heights, we were able to redeem ourselves. But pretty much you had loss after loss. Finally, when we arrived up here, we knew General Sir William Howe's bringing his troops up here with General von Kniphausen with the Hessian auxiliaries coming up here. And it was a very, very tough time. You're up against the strongest army in the world at this point, the most advanced weaponry, although we're using the same style weapons earlier in the war. We are using the Brown Bess muskets just like they are. But, you have all these difficulties. You have a well-trained army. And here you are. You got common people. You have bakers. You have farmers here, shopkeepers, cordwainers, people who make shoes. You have tailors, just the common population trying to band together to try to defeat this enemy, to gain our independence. And unfortunately, this was a defeat. But as the years went on, Washington was able to keep his army together. There were difficult times, especially think about this time of year in the wintertime. Think about 1778. It's February. You have men in Valley Forge. They're there starving. Although you're surrounded by a community that has a lot of food. They're producing things. You just don't have the money because the Congress doesn't have the money. The Congress is evicted from Philadelphia from October 1777, and they're not there. They're all the way on York, Pennsylvania. He's being told, just go to the farms and take what you want, which isn't a good idea because you're going to lose these people to the British side. And General Sir William Howe, occupying the city of Philadelphia, has species. He has gold, silver, and copper coinage, not this piece of paper that the Continental Congress has put out. So you're dealing with a lot of difficulties throughout the war. I would say probably one of the greatest weapons Washington used was, which started in 1778 and continued throughout the war, was the Culper spy ring that he had under Colonel Benjamin Talmadge and those 6 brave people that helped us gain our independence by something simple as just spying on the British at their headquarters in New York, and then later on leaving false information, false numbers, false locations of military encampments that really weren't real military encampments. And probably because of that, Washington was able to have the British Army divided in half. They have a false sense of security in 1781. They think that the French and the British, French and the Americans are going to go and attack them. Meanwhile, Washington's goal is to march them all the way down to Virginia. So the British don't have enough troops. They don't have a large enough navy because half of the army is up here. And I would say that was probably the biggest weapon Washington had. He knew he didn't have the strength. He didn't have the money. But if we drag the war on, and now we have the spy ring, and these people's names are unknown, we're just using code names and numbers, possibly they'll do a better job than what's tried to start back in 1776, and you had that poor school teacher, 21 years old, Nathan Hale, when he was captured and hung 24 hours later.
Wow. Michael Grillo, why do you enjoy and you're a high energy guy in describing the heroism, perseverance, leadership of General Washington? Why do you enjoy telling the story of General Washington so much?
Well, when I went to school many, many years ago, they were still teaching American history, still teaching us about the founders and the explorers in the early age. Unfortunately, it's education. This is how I was educated. And by the time I was 7 years old in the Cub Scouts, we went to a place, of course, called Valley Forge. And when I started reading as a child all the heroism of these soldiers, reading multiple biographies of George Washington, 20 years ago is when I started dressing like this, portraying General George Washington to teach the public about history, about the amazing things that went on here and how we gained our independence.
Michael Grillo, great to see you here at the Purdy House in White Plains for the salute to the birthday of General and President George Washington. Great to see you.
Same here. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. This is Ken Kraetzer for Sons of American Legion Radio and RallyPoint.com in White Plains, New York.